All right, welcome back. I actually just recorded this same video. This is my second time going through it. I don't know what happened. I thought it was really good, probably my best one. And I looked, and apparently only like 3 minutes recorded. So we're going to try this again. Looking at Plymouth Colony Part 2. Plymouth Colony Part 2. Part duh in French. Does two in French. All right, anyways. I took French in college. For some reason I know that. So building the colony. We talked yesterday about how the Pilgrims, the Separatists, the Puritans, again, we're going to kind of refer to them by several different names, how they had set sail from Plymouth, England, and came to the Americas. And again, their initial location where they wanted to land was the Jamestown area in Virginia. But because of a bad storm, it blows them off track and they go a little bit further north than they anticipated. And they make landfall on November 11th. This, where they landed, is titled Plymouth Rock. And the reason it's titled Plymouth Rock is because there's a rock and it says 1620 on it. So, like, they inscribed the year in which they had made landfall. Um, but that is not the location in which they are going to remain. What they do, the Pilgrims, is they stay aboard the Mayflower and they just kind of search the coastline in Massachusetts until they find an ideal location, the location in which they believe will be best to begin their settlement, begin the building process. Again, this isn't the Cape Cod area, so it's like Massachusetts where you had that little boot. It had been previously mapped out by the English in earlier expeditions, mainly by people we already talked about, John White and John Smith. They named this new colony New Plymouth, again, after where they had resided in England, in Plymouth, England. So they named this New Plymouth. It's like, and that's kind of like New York. It was just a little, I guess, related history. New York was actually New Amsterdam because it was, again, people from Amsterdam like settling in that area of New York. So they call it New Amsterdam, New Netherlands. And that's kind of like any like new place, like New Mexico is kind of the same deal. Like New Mexico was actually part of Mexico, and after the uh, Mexican American War, New Mexico is filled with, again, a lot of people that were, formerly Mexican, and so it's titled New Mexico. Anytime you see like new something, there's a reason behind that. There's definitely a reason behind that. Okay, so building the colony. Now, what's the biggest problem with this time period? Or this I guess the dates in which they land. December 21st is the first day of winter. Now, before, like, I guess modern times, like where we have indoor heating, indoor air conditioning, like, dude, the weather was your biggest enemy. And that unless you lived in Los Angeles or Hawaii, where it's like kind of nice year round, again, like you're dealing with certain elements throughout the year. Like maybe you live in a place where there's a lot of rainfall. Maybe you live someplace where it gets really hot and humid. Maybe, and again, we saw that in Jamestown, and that led to issues. Maybe you live somewhere where it's really cold and frigid, and that is what's going to be the problem in Massachusetts. Again, what are winters like for us? Winters for us are, they kind of vary a little bit. Sometimes they are like really cold. Sometimes they're a little warm. Sometimes we get a lot of snow. Sometimes we get no snow. Sometimes we get a little, somewhat snow. Sometimes it's dry winter. Again, it kind of varies. There's a joke: if you don't like the weather in North Carolina, wait 5 minutes. Anyways, um, but it's cold. It's cold in the winter. It's cold in the winter. Now, here's the thing: like December 21st, like that is the very beginning of winter. But like December isn't the coldest month, at least not in North Carolina. I don't know exactly what the weather and the climate is in Massachusetts. Never lived in Massachusetts. Never been to Massachusetts. I'd love to, but never have. Furthest north I've been is New York. Wasn't a fan. Sorry, hate to break it to you. Wasn't a fan. Not my kind of place. Philadelphia, by the way, but on the other hand, phenomenal, freaking phenomenal. Anyway, so What are where was I going? Oh yeah. December is not even the coldest month in North Carolina. Like typically it's January. I would say more so February. Maybe just because I'm outside more in February. That's when baseball starts up. Baseball we other than this year start up like second week of February, and for those like first like 2-3 weeks, dude, it's and even into like March, like it's cold. Like, wearing like a couple layers of sweatpants, a couple different long sleeve shirts, a hoodie, toboggan, a couple pairs of socks. Like it gets cold. It gets cold. Um, highs can be in the 30s, lows can be in the 20s and teens. Again, it's cold, but we got to think about this from, okay, now Massachusetts, a couple hundred miles north of us, even colder, even colder, and they're going to have more snowfall as well. All right, let's go to our next slide because I can keep talking about weather, and we need to get to winter anyway. So the first winter. So again, we just talked about how it's cold, a lot of snow, it's windy, and when it's cold and windy, like that's a deadly combination. It being cold and windy, like, dude, that wind just rips through you. It's like, dude, it's, oh God, slices through you. I guess it was 2 years ago, maybe, I guess a year and a half ago is probably closer to it. Like there was like a terrible, like cold wave, I guess, in like up north, like I think it was Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, like that area. And the biggest problems, not only was it cold, but it was really windy. And like people were like advised like not even to go outside, like it was that bad. But again, we live in a very I'm not even spoiled because we're only spoiled because like our ancestors ran into problems and was like, golly, we can't keep doing this. And then they solved that problem. So I'm not saying like technology is necessarily like a bad thing because Lord knows I love some AC. I'm not a big like I can do cold weather better than I can hot weather. After it gets above 90, like I'm not like my friends like to go play golf during the summer. It's like hit me up when it's back down in the 70s. I'll go. May, like I guess like late May to late August. It's not even worth it. It's not even worth it. Now I like being outside. I like doing stuff outside. I just hate being hot. Like I don't like it. I don't like it. Um, so like in the fall and even the winter, like I try to be outside as much as I can. And spring too. I mean, spring I'm outside all the time. It feels like because of baseball. Anyway, so they land and they begin building their settlement December 21st, 1620. Again, it is cold. They cannot build housing fast enough. So what do they have to do? Well, they're lacking shelter because they are building shelter and trying to build as much housing as they can right off the bat. They're not able to even like hunt and fish because they're not planting anything. You're not harvesting anything. There's nothing. There's no vegetation to eat. It's cold. It's windy. It's snowy. You're not. There's nothing. There's no like plant life to eat. So they have to hunt and fish, but they don't have enough people to really do that because they have to have people building because they got to get shelter. Got to get shelter. So what do they end up doing? Many of the colonists, many of the pilgrims actually begin like essentially like staying on the Mayflower and living on the Mayflower. But this causes its own problems because again, they'd already been on the Mayflower for months, but now they're in this new place. They're more susceptible to new diseases, new viruses, um, you know, new, I guess, bacteria. So their immune systems are a little bit more compromised. Disease being on those closed, this enclosed captivity on the Mayflower, it leads to the spread of disease. With the spread of disease, that means people die. In that first winter, 43 of the 100 colonists that were brought with them die, or I should say 102. Sorry, I had a mistype right there. So you're looking at almost half of the colonists die during that first winter. Again, these are family members. These are all like that. That probably makes it an even bigger deal. Not to like say that single people aren't important. Like, definitely, obviously, like everybody has family, but these are families that are with each other, most of them at least. So you're having family members like dying, and they're having to the other ones are having to watch that still press forward. Again, much like we saw in Jamestown, this first winter in the Plymouth colony isn't going very well. It's not going well. Uh, there's going to be it's going to be up to these 43 colonists that remain that that are going to be tasked with keeping this settlement afloat. But unlike the Jamestown colonists, it's not like they could kind of like pull the plug. The Jamestown colonists didn't. Like, they pushed through, but they had the opportunity to kind of pull that plug because they weren't. It wasn't seen as essentially like an attempt at creating a new place, a new way of living. It was just a way of making money. So at some point, they could kind of pull the plug on that. All right, cut our losses. But the Pilgrims, again, they are attempting to settle and create a new life for themselves. This is their exodus. And so they can't just give up, because it's not like they can go back to England and just do things how they wanted to in England. They'd already kind of been pushed out of England. So what is going to save the colonists? Well, it's actually their relations with the natives. Now, couple things, and I kind of went off. I'm not went off here. Let me move my. Okay, I didn't go off. Like, I wasn't mad, but I did kind of maybe go on a tangent in the last video that I tried to record that didn't, only picked up 3 minutes. But so I'm gonna try not to go on that tangent, but I do want to make sure that you understand this. So, all right, when we began talking about Columbus, one of the things I wanted you to see, and not just I wanted you to see for my own sake, like I wanted you to see because like it's what we have. It's the information that we have. Like, it doesn't make me feel better if you think this way or that way. I just want you to see what was, like, what we know about the event, and I want you to learn that. Like, that's why I try to give you guys as much primary source material as I can, because anything else, like secondary sources, third sources, like, again, it's kind of watered down, and it's hard to know if that actually happened, if that's just somebody's take on what happened. And I don't want you to take, I don't want you just to take everything I say as being like true. I want you to see it from the people that were there. Like, that's history. That's history. Just listening to me talk about stuff that used to that happened before, that's not history. That's just storytelling. That's a movie. That's a book, and those are good things. But like, history is in the moment. But it's only in the moment at that moment. From then on, we have to look back and analyze that moment. Anyways, one of the things I hope you got from the Columbus, the whole week we did on Columbus, was that the natives and the Europeans, whether they be Spanish, Portuguese, French, English, whatever, there are good relations with some of the natives, and there are bad relations with the other natives. Just like back in Europe, like, there's Englishmen that hate other Englishmen. There's Englishmen that hate. All right, let me do that. Let me do that in different order. There's Englishmen that hate people from Spain. There's Englishmen that like people from Spain. There are Englishmen that like people from France. And I say Englishmen, I'm talking about men and women. I'm just, and there's Englishmen that don't like people from France. There's Englishmen that like people from Portugal. There's Englishmen that don't like people from Portugal. There's Englishmen that like other Englishmen, and there are Englishmen that hate other Englishmen. Uh, I know that's a kind of a convoluted way of saying that people are going to like other people and hate other people for various reasons. For various reasons, like the Pilgrims, they were English, but they had been essentially kind of pushed out of England because they wanted to purify the Church of England. So they were having conflict with their own, people, if you want to call it that. I don't see the point other than they share certain common characteristics. Like, they have the same race, they have essentially the same belief system, just kind of the details of it are different. They're still Christian, like both of them. They may not look at the others being Christian, but they're still Christian. They have some of the same, their cultural practice are the same. And um, the Wampanoag tribe, which are going to be the tribe that the Pilgrims befriend, they are going to have problems with other native groups, just like, again, when we talked about Columbus. Like, when Columbus landed, like, he was warned about other native groups in the area that had had conflict with those native groups, to stay away from them. And, like, again, that's the part that I guess I went off on a tangent last, and I'm gonna try not to do it on this one. But that's the thing about history, and it's we tend to look at people like back then is like uh, as being different than people today. There's not. There's not a difference. There's not a difference. People have not changed. It's just like technology that's changed. It's the way that people live that have changed, and not even all that much. But people themselves, human nature, has not changed. Um, you know, I, I could say this. I could say this over and over, and there's really no reason to. Let me just tell this story. So, a Wampanoag tribe member, Samoset, befriends the Plymouth Colonists, and they strike a peace treaty. Now, why do they strike this peace treaty? Well, it's because obviously obviously the Pilgrims need help. They're struggling. They're going to die if they do not build enough shelter, find enough food. They are going to die. The Wampanoag, they are having conflict with another tribe in their area. They had been at war with each other. Now, why does this matter? Why does that matter? Well, it matters because that is what the peace treaty is centered upon between the Wampanoag and the Pilgrims, is protection. So here's the thing: the Wampanoag agreed to help the Pilgrims, to teach them how to to help them build and to teach them how to farm and how to hunt. Because again, like these are not um, you know they don't know as much about living off the land as the natives do, and the Wampanoag. So why are they doing this? Why are they going to help the natives build, or excuse me, help the Pilgrims build and teach them how to hunt, how to fish, how to farm? Why are they going to do that? Because they need protection. And what do the Pilgrims have? They have guns. And guess what? The other native groups don't have. They don't have guns. So the Wampanoag befriend the Plymouth colonists because they have guns and they can protect them from the other tribes, and they both go to war with these other tribes together. Now, people are like people are like just they they only want to look at like the Europeans that come over as being like pure evil to the natives. And that's just not the case. Like, it's just not true. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't like some problems, because there definitely are. And I'm not saying that like a lot of the natives, like, a lot of the natives do die, like either from, most of it from disease, a large majority of it to disease. But like, yeah, there is conflict. Like, there is conflict, but there was already conflict, and there's always going to be conflict. There always is. That's human nature. Like, we're going to have problems with other people. It's just like, how do we settle that? But we can't even settle our differences today. Like, I mean, we're maybe worse at it today than we've ever been. Uh, I mean, I mean, it's election season. I mean, just watch a commercial, and you think people today are that much morally superior to where, you know, they can settle conflict better and there not be conflict. I've seen more. Personally speaking, I've seen more conflict over this year than I've ever seen in my life, for one reason or another. And because people are always at conflict, and when we think that we aren't a part of that, like, we think that we are. The problem for me is when people think they are better than people that came before them, because that's just not the case. It's just not the case. All right. Anyway, again, I can go off all right. So, because the colonists are protecting the Wampanoag tribe sends Squanto to help the colonists. Now, why do they send Squanto? because Squanto speaks fluent English. Now, how does that happen? Squanto had actually been taken captive by an earlier English expedition and had been sent back to England as a slave. And during that time, in his essential like imprisonment, Squanto learns English. He picks up the language. They say that the easiest way to learn a language is to go live in that place of the language you're trying to learn. Now, I don't know how doable that is. I don't know who can just do that. And in this case, this was not voluntary. This is not done voluntarily. But Squanto picks up the English language. Squanto is then sent back to the Americas on an English expedition to help some of these later Jamestown settlers, kind of help them get into the area and again kind of teach them how to survive. Well, during this, Squanto is essentially in this process he is freed and he migrates north and into the Wampanoag tribe. And so what are the chances that the Pilgrims just so happened to land in a place they weren't anticipating landing? Like, they weren't trying to go here, but they happened to land in a place where there is a native that speaks English. I talked to you about this with Columbus, the biggest problem, and with the lost colony. Look at Jamestown. Like, the biggest problem between the natives and the colonists, the Europeans, are that they do not speak the same language, so they cannot communicate effectively with each other. When you cannot communicate effectively, which is where most conflict comes from, people cannot communicate effectively. And I'm not saying that I can. Like, I have my problems as well. But when people cannot do that, when they cannot communicate effectively, that is where conflict becomes much, much, much worse, because now there's this anxious feeling because you do not know what the other side is thinking or what they are feeling. And because you cannot communicate this to each other, you're kind of on edge, Uh, I about made a joke, but I'm not going to. I was going to say, get married and you'll figure out how that is. I'm just kidding. Don't tell my wife. Anyways, so the Wampanoag send Squanto to help the colonists. Squanto, being able to speak fluent English, is a godsend. To the Pilgrims. And again, these are very religious people. They believe that God has granted them this land and that God is going to help them survive. And so for a while, it didn't look like that, though. For a while, again, we have to remember, like, their education comes from the Bible. And so for a while, it looked like they were going to be another story in this, that they were going to be, they were Job. They were Job of the Bible. They had everything taken from them. But they stay strong in their faith. And in that process, through the persecution, which again, this is much like Exodus as well. I guess there's a lot of similarities to those stories. Like, in both stories, in Exodus and in Job, talking about books of the Bible. And again, we have to talk about this because that's what the Pilgrims, like, that's who they were. Like, they were God worshiping people. So we have to look at, like, what kind of made them the way they were. But either way, both story Exodus and the story of Job, like, in both, like, God's chosen people or chosen person is losing everything they have, but in the process they're gaining something even greater. So, um, the Pilgrims have lost a lot, and it would probably be easy for them to lose their faith, but they continue forward, and because of their hard work and their perseverance and maybe divine intervention. Um, it's wild. It's wild. There's actually books about this called um, what is it called? It's Miracles of the Republic, Divine Providence. I've got it somewhere, but it talks about, like, this. This is one of the stories it tells, is like how unlikely all of this was not this should not have worked for the Pilgrims, but for somehow, some way, it did. And Squanto being a large part of that, and how he ended up there. Like, what are the chances of all these things happening? But again, through the suffering of the Pilgrims, they're they they they're granted something even greater on the other side of it. Like, not only are they now having their own place to worship and live freely, but they've also um, they've experienced a lot of hardship and come through it. So it's a beautiful story. It really is. And um, all this with Squanto. Squanto teaches them how to hunt, how to fish, how to farm. Farming being a large part of it. They are not farmers. Like they are. Some of them have some knowledge of farming, but they are not farmers themselves. So Squanto teaching them how to do so allows them to be able to survive. And in November of 1621, so this is less than a year than when they first made landfall. It is during the spring that Squanto again teaches them how to farm. And, again, they farm throughout the spring and the summer. And in the fall, in November of 1621, there is a harvest festival between the natives and the colonists. Now, the harvest festival is exactly what you think. At times of harvest, there's a big celebration, again, to celebrate like the bountiful harvest that was. This harvest festival is what is going to become Thanksgiving in the later United States. The celebration was not out of the ordinary for the English. Like anytime there was a large harvest, the English would celebrate that, and they would call it a Thanksgiving. They would give thanks to God anytime. And this didn't have to always be like a harvest festival. They would call any time that God had blessed them in extraordinary ways. They would call this and eat on this and call this Thanksgiving, giving thanks. This is what would become the holiday that we love and enjoy every single year. And I look forward to this year's Thanksgiving. It might be a little different. I don't know. I don't know. I love Thanksgiving though. It's time for family. And this is what you're reading in your primary source document today is a celebration between um, essentially two families. Now, not all the Pilgrims are related, and not all the Native Americans are related, but they are kind of a family in of themselves. And these two groups of people are going to celebrate together. So it's almost kind of the unification of two families, and that is what Thanksgiving's about. It's about bringing people together, and this is why. This is why. Um, yeah, I love talking about Plymouth. Um, I love American history. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I know